Welcome to Washington Today for Monday, January 12th, 2026. I'm Gary Sterkoff. Thank you for joining us. More reaction today from the Justice Department's announcement of a criminal investigation into Federal Reserve Chair Jerome Powell. The department announced yesterday it's looking into whether Chair Powell lied to Congress about the estimated $2.5 billion price tag for the Fed building's renovation. Jerome Powell says he thinks the investigation is because of his refusal to follow the president's demands on interest rates. We'll hear from him, members of Congress, and the White House coming up. Minnesota Attorney General Keith Ellison announced a lawsuit today against the Department of Homeland Security, Immigration and Customs Enforcement, and the Border Patrol. He wants to end their operations in the state. He spoke following Homeland Security Secretary Kristi Noem's announcement yesterday that she's sending more federal agents to the state. We'll hear from Attorney General Ellison and Minneapolis Mayor Jacob Frey coming up. Here is Chair Powell's statement, came out late last night.
Good evening. On Friday, the Department of Justice served the Federal Reserve with grand jury subpoenas, threatening a criminal indictment related to my testimony before the Senate Banking Committee last June. That testimony concerned in part a multi-year project to renovate historic Federal Reserve office buildings. I have deep respect for the rule of law and for accountability in our democracy. No one, certainly not the chair of the Federal Reserve, is above the law. But this unprecedented action should be seen in the broader context of the administration's threats and ongoing pressure. This new threat is not about my testimony last June or about the renovation of the Federal Reserve buildings. It is not about Congress's oversight role. The Fed, through testimony and other public disclosures, made every effort to keep Congress informed about the renovation project. Those are pretexts. The threat of criminal charges is a consequence of the Federal Reserve setting interest rates based on our best assessment of what will serve the public, rather than following the preferences of the president. This is about whether the Fed will be able to continue to set interest rates based on evidence and economic conditions, or whether instead monetary policy will be directed by political pressure or intimidation. I have served at the Federal Reserve under 4 administrations, Republicans and Democrats alike. In every case, I have carried out my duties without political fear or favor, focused solely on our mandate of price stability and maximum employment. Public service sometimes requires standing firm in the face of threats. I will continue to do the job the Senate confirmed me to do, with integrity and a commitment to serving the American people. Thank you.
Federal Reserve Chair Jerome Powell's statement. In reaction from the White House today, here's Press Secretary Caroline Leavitt.
I'm Jerome Powell. President Trump has mentioned on multiple occasions that the administration could probably bring a lawsuit against him. Did the president ever direct DOJ officials to open an investigation into Powell?
No.
And can you reassure the American public that his longstanding criticisms and public comments about Powell had nothing to do with the investigation?
Look, the president has every right to criticize the Fed chair. He has a First Amendment right, just like all of you do. And one thing for sure, the president's made it quite clear, is Jerome Powell is bad at his job. As for whether or not Jerome Powell is a criminal, that's an answer the Department of Justice is going to have to find out, and it looks like they intend to find that out.
Caroline, thank you. 2 more questions on the Fed for you. Senator Tillis is promising to hold up all Fed nominees until this legal matter with Jerome Powell is resolved. What does the president make of that?
I haven't spoken to the president about Senator Tillis' comments. I'll leave that to our legislative affairs shop to figure out, and I'll let the president speak on that himself.
Go ahead. Believe that the Fed should operate independently from him.
The president has made it quite clear he thinks Jerome Powell is bad at his job, and the president has made it quite clear, as have many economists, by the way, that interest rates should be lowered, and they should have been lowered a long time ago.
But does he believe in the independence of the Fed, Caroline?
He has, and he said that many times.
White House Press Secretary Caroline Leavitt. In a joint statement, a group of former federal officials called the inquiry an unprecedented intrusion into the Fed. The statement was signed in part by former Fed chairs Ben Bernanke and Alan Greenspan and former Treasury Secretaries Robert Rubin and Timothy Geithner. It said in part, "This is how monetary policy is made in emerging markets with weak institutions, with highly negative consequences for inflation and the functioning of their economies more broadly. It has no place in the United States, whose greatest strength is the rule of law, which is at the foundation of our economic success. And this afternoon, CNBC's Sarah Eisen reporting that Janet Yellen, who served as both Treasury Secretary and Fed Chair, called the situation, quote, extremely chilling. She added, I'm surprised the market isn't more concerned. It seems to me that the market should be concerned. She went on to say, knowing Powell as well as I do, the odds that he would have lied are zero. So I do believe they're going after him because they want his seat and want him gone. Also reacting from the White House today was Chief Economic Advisor Kevin Hassett.
Can you say whether you have any thoughts about what impact this could have on the market?
I would expect that the markets would be happy to see that there's more transparency with the Fed. It's something that people have been calling for quite a long time.
Are you worried that the probe undermines the independence of the central bank and could destabilize the markets?
I guess the question is, if you think the building costs $20 billion or $10 billion, do you think at some point that it's appropriate for the federal government to investigate? And it seems like the Justice Department has decided that they want to see what's going on over there with this building that's, massively more expensive than any building in the history of Washington. And if I were Fed chair, I would want them to do that. I think that it's really important to understand where the taxpayer money goes and to understand why it goes this way or that.
Do you think there's a chance Powell will stay on as a governor on the board even after his term as chair?
I'm not sure about that. I've not talked to Jay about that. He's a good person. If he wants to continue government service, then he'll make that call when the time comes.
You think that would be something that next Fed chair, whether it's yourself or someone else, would?
We'd have to see how it goes. But Jay's a good person.
And you're still interested in the job?
Yes.
We have Chief Economic Advisor Kevin Hassett. And just this note on the markets today, the S&P 500 went up 0.2%. The Dow Jones recovered from an early loss of nearly 500 points and added 86, or also 0.2%, while the NASDAQ Composite gained 0.3%. At least 3 key Senate Republicans have spoken out against this. As you heard from Caroline Leavitt, a question asked of her in a post on X, Senate Banking Committee Republican Tom Tillis of North Carolina said he would oppose any nomination for Jerome Powell's successor until this matter is resolved. He told CQ Roll Call, if there were any remaining doubt about whether advisors within the Trump administration are actively pushing to end the independence of the Federal Reserve, there should now be none. CQ Roll Call also reports those concerns were echoed by Lisa Murkowski of Alaska and Kevin Kramer of North Dakota. House Republican leaders are also talking. Here's Speaker Mike Johnson speaking to CNN's Manu Raju.
Hello. Mr. Speaker, every Fed chairman says this is an attack on the independence of the institution, and they're raising major alarms. Are you not concerned about the ramifications of this investigation?
We're gonna let the investigation play out. There's concern about cost overruns and whatever the allegations are. I don't know. I wasn't involved in that. It's something that you have to look into, and so we'll have to reserve judgment. I know the media loves to jump to conclusions. Everyone does every day around everything here, and I think you have to let the process play out. If Chairman Powell's innocent, then he can prove that, and it'll all come out.
But there's so many people. There's Comey, there's Letitia James, now there is Powell. Are they not? Is the Justice Department not being weaponized by this president?
No, the Justice Department is not being weaponized. It was for 4 years under Biden-Harris, and so that's what everybody expects. But I do not think that's
are you worried about?
House Financial Services Chair French Smith of Arkansas put out a statement today. It reads, in part, while we've had our disagreements over the years, I've found Jerome Powell to be forthright, candid, and a person of integrity. Pursuing criminal charges related to his testimony on building renovations at a time when the nation's economy requires focus creates an unnecessary distraction. That from House Financial Services Committee Chair French Hill of Arkansas. Now, there was reaction to this today on the Senate floor. Here's Democratic leader Chuck Schumer.
Anyone with 2 eyes and half a brain knows exactly what this criminal probe represents. A brazen attempt by Donald Trump to cannibalize the Fed's independence. The allegations behind this probe are clearly bogus. This has nothing to do with building renovations, of all things. It has everything to do with Donald Trump weaponizing the DOJ into his attack dog and bullying America's central bank into submission on something unrelated to what they do. This is another ominous, troubling step toward the MAGAification of America's monetary policy, which is the bedrock of the global economy and essential for stability in the markets. So the American people should beware. If you're worried about making sure mortgage rates come down and making it easier to buy a home, Donald Trump's attack on the Fed should trouble you deeply. If you're worried about what the economy is going to look like in the next 6 months, 12 months, and beyond, Donald Trump's attack on the Fed should alarm you. If you're a Senate Republican in this chamber who has at any point spoken out about the Fed's independence, about the need to bring inflation down, about the importance of law and order, now is the time to find your voice and to take a stand. The bogus criminal probe conducted by the DOJ screams for congressional oversight. We need to bring DOJ officials to testify before the Senate and explain this outrageous criminal probe. And the Senate must reject any future Trump nominee to the Fed, so long as this dark cloud continues to hang over the central bank. Because if Donald Trump can use the threat of criminal investigation to influence monetary policy, then we'll have no independent Fed to speak of. And again, interest rates will go up, mortgage rates will go up, car loan rates will go up, credit card rates will go up, and the American consumer will pay more. The American consumer is already worried, troubled, and devastated by the lack of affordability, and what Trump is doing will make things even more unaffordable. You'd say, what the heck does one have to do with the other? But when the markets feel there's no steadiness, no stability in the Fed, they charge more, they get worried, they clamp down. And look, Donald Trump is clearly angry that his own presidency has been a disaster for our economy. So he's looking for a scapegoat, and he thinks Jerome Powell can be one. He's made a big mistake. No one's going to fall for that bull. But Jay Powell and the Fed, everyone knows Jay Powell and the Fed aren't the reason Donald Trump's poll numbers and our economy are in the garbage. If he wants someone to blame, Donald Trump should simply look in the mirror, not at Jerome Powell.
Senate Democratic Leader Chuck Schumer earlier this afternoon on the Senate floor. Now, we also heard reaction from Senate Banking Ranking Member Elizabeth Warren today on an event we carried live here on the C-SPAN networks. We'll have that for you in just a minute. Both the House and Senate were in today. The Senate started work on whether to move forward with a House-passed government funding package. That package covers the Commerce, Justice, Energy and Interior departments and other related agencies through the end of September. We're just 2 weeks before a government funding runs out at the end of January, and there are at least 6 more bills that the House and Senate need to pass to keep the government fully open. Senate Republican leader John Thune talked today about Republicans' work on border security.
In 21 and 23, I visited the southern border and I saw chaos. In 2026, I visited and I saw calm and order. And our country is so much safer because of it. I'm grateful for all that President Trump and his administration have done to make and keep our southern border secure. I'm proud of the work that we've done here in Congress to help ensure that border security is here to stay. Our Working Families Tax Cuts legislation made a generational investment in the resources that law enforcement needs to secure the border and deter illegal immigration. We funded completion of the border wall, new technology and border surveillance equipment, additional Border Patrol agents, expanded detention capacity, and expanded partnerships with local law enforcement to enforce immigration law. And these resources are already having an effect. On my recent trip to the border, agents repeatedly emphasized how they're seeing effects from our working families tax cuts legislation, in particular with the addition of needed new personnel and counter-drone technology. Thanks to that counter-drone technology, Border Patrol personnel can take over or destroy cartel drones at the border, limiting cartels' surveillance abilities and ability to transport dangerous items. And I'm proud that after 4 long years of strain, thanks to President Biden's border crisis, Border Patrol agents are finally receiving the resources they need to do their jobs, prevent illegal immigration, and keep us safe. Mr. President, January 9th was National Law Enforcement Appreciation Day. And my conversations with Border Patrol agents on my recent trip reminded me of just how blessed we are to have men and women who step up and answer the call to serve as law enforcement officers. From the Border Patrol to the Capitol Police and other federal agents, to our local sheriff and police departments, our safety is secured for us by men and women who willingly choose to place themselves between us and danger. Too often, the sacrifices these men and women make are not appreciated. In fact, we've seen a reprehensible amount of hostility toward law enforcement in recent months and years. And I hope that today and every day, we will take a moment to remember what our law enforcement officers do for us and how very lucky we are to have them.
Senate Republican leader John Thune on the floor earlier today. The vote to move forward on that funding package is scheduled for 5:30 p.m. Eastern Time. You can watch it live on C-SPAN 2 and cspan.org and the C-SPAN Now mobile app. That is where all of our congressional coverage, you can find it there. From azcentral.com in Phoenix, Democratic Senator Mark Kelly filed suit today against Pentagon Chief Pete Hegseth over the move to censure and demote him for taking part in the illegal orders video, deepening a standoff over free speech involving members of Congress and the military. Of course, Senator Kelly was one of the 6 Democrats to appear in a video urging military personnel to refuse illegal orders. Senator Kelly talked about it this afternoon on the floor.
I just never expected that I would have to protect the rule of law against a Secretary of Defense. Pete Hegseth is now coming after what I earned through my 25 years of military service in violation of my rights as an American and as a retired veteran and as a United States Senator whose job it is to hold this and any administration accountable. He doesn't like what I said, and so he is trying to censure and demote me. And let's talk for just a second about what it is that I said that he decided to censure me over, according to his letter. First, that I simply restated the law, that service members must refuse illegal orders. Somehow, restating the law is now against the law, according to Pete Hegseth. This isn't new. It's something every recruit is taught. It's something that Pete Hegseth himself has said repeatedly, including specifically about this president and Commander-in-Chief Donald Trump. Second, that I criticized him for firing admirals and generals, and that this administration is surrounding themselves with a bunch of yes men. Let me repeat it here right now. It is bad for our national security that Pete Hegseth fired admirals and generals because of who they are. And a bunch of yes men, well, that's bad for any organization. Lastly, he is censuring me because I've raised concerns about his actions and military operations. Well, that's my job. I have every right to say these things as an American, as a retired service member, and as a U.S. Senator, and especially as a member of the Armed Services Committee whose duty it is to provide oversight over the Department of Defense. Pete Hegseth's unconstitutional crusade against me sends a chilling message to every retired member of the military. If you speak out and say something that the President and Secretary of Defense doesn't like, you will be censured, threatened with demotion, or even prosecuted.
Arizona Democratic Senator Mark Kelly on the Senate floor earlier today. Now, azcentral.com reports the January 12th case filed in federal court here in Washington, D.C. seeks to reverse the administrative rebuke Defense Secretary Hegseth announced on January 5th, but it could also establish new clarity on whether the Pentagon can invoke military law to effectively limit what a senator who oversees that agency can say. AZ Central goes on to write the suit casts the actions against Kelly as an unprecedented sanction on a member of Congress by the executive branch of government for, quote, disfavored political speech. The suit reads, the First Amendment forbids the government and its officials from punishing disfavored expression or retaliating against protected speech. That prohibition applies with particular force to legislators speaking on matters of public policy. You're listening to Washington Today.
On this episode of Book Notes Plus with our host Brian Lamb.
After 15 books on revolutionary America, John Ferling still has more to say about the early period in the life of the United States. Ferling is Professor Emeritus of History at the University of West Georgia. In the preface of his current book, Shots Heard Round the World, Professor Ferling opens with this, quote, now that America will be commemorating the 250th anniversary of its War of Independence, what pops into your mind as you hear or witness references to that conflict? Professor Ferling gives his answer in a 500-page book focusing on America, Britain, and Europe in the Revolutionary War era.
A new interview with author John Ferling about his book, Shots Heard Round the World, America, Britain, and Europe in the Revolutionary War. Book Notes Plus with our host Brian Lamb is available wherever you get your podcasts and on the C-SPAN Now app.
Welcome back to Washington Today. Minnesota Attorney General Keith Ellison announced his state is filing a lawsuit against the Trump administration following Homeland Security Secretary Kristi Noem's announcement yesterday that she is sending at least 1,000 more federal agents to the state. Here's Attorney General Ellison.
We're here to announce a lawsuit we're filing against the United States Department of Homeland Security to end the unlawful, unprecedented surge of the federal law enforcement agents into Minnesota. Because this has to stop. It just has to stop. We allege that the obvious targeting of Minnesota for our diversity, for our democracy, and our differences of opinion with the federal government is a violation of the Constitution and of federal law. We allege that the surge's reckless impact on our schools, on our local law enforcement, is a violation of the 10th Amendment and the sovereign laws and powers of the Constitution grants to states. We allege that DHS's use of excessive and lethal force, their warrantless, racist arrests, their targeting of our courts, our churches, houses of worship, and schools are a violation of the Administrative Procedures Act on arbitrary and capricious federal actions. And we ask that the courts will end the surge of thousands of DHS agents into Minnesota. We ask the courts to end the DHS unlawful behavior in our state, the intimidation, the threats, the violence. We ask the courts to end the tactics on our places of worship, our schools, our courts, our marketplaces, our hospitals, and even funeral homes. The deployment of thousands of armed, mass DHS agents to Minnesota has done our state serious harm. This is, in essence, a federal invasion of the Twin Cities and Minnesota, and it must stop. DHS agents have sown chaos and terror across the metropolitan area and in cities across the state of Minnesota. Schools have gone onto lockdown. Entire districts have had to cancel school for tens of thousands of students to ensure safety and offer online education because of the students' and the parents' fear of coming into the school. Local businesses are struggling. Revenues are down. And some retail stores, daycares, and restaurants have actually closed because people are afraid to go out and to do their shopping, whether they're immigrants or whether they are citizens of many generations. This surge has made us less safe. Thousands of poorly trained, aggressive, and armed agents of the state, of the federal government have rolled into our communities, overwhelmed our local police departments, and law enforcement agencies should be focused on our public safety, but instead, many are dealing with the aftermath of DHS agents' chaos and violence.
Minnesota Attorney General Keith Ellison speaking this afternoon. Minneapolis Mayor Jacob Frey also spoke.
What we are seeing right now is not normal immigration enforcement. We are not asking ICE not to do ICE things. We are asking this federal government to stop the unconstitutional conduct that is invading our streets each and every day. You've seen the videos. At times there are as many as 50 agents arresting one person. The scale is wildly disproportionate and has nothing to do with keeping people safe. In Minneapolis, we've done work extensively with the federal government under multiple administrations to keep people in our city safe. We have worked with the DEA, the ATF, the FBI, the Attorney General's office, as well as the U.S. Attorney's office, to successfully drive down crime in our city. We've seen the results of that work, but let's be clear. The stated reason of this federal government for bringing in this full invasion of ICE and border control is not safety. If it were safety, there would be other mechanisms to achieve safety. By the way, crime is down in virtually every category, in virtually every neighborhood of this city. If this were about fraud, then you'd see an invasion perhaps of accountants. But that's not what you see. What you see is people being indiscriminately taken off our streets. Discrimination only takes place to the extent that a determination has made that somebody is Somali or is Latino, or at least they look that way, and then there is virtually no discrimination thereafter. Here's the thing. You can't indiscriminately take people off our streets, American citizens off our streets. You cannot drag pregnant women through the snow. You're not allowed to take teenagers out of their car and detain them when they are in fact American citizens. That is against the law in every state. That is against our United States Constitution.
Minneapolis Mayor Jacob Frey speaking to reporters earlier this afternoon. Minnesota Public Radio reports that the Minneapolis, Fridley, and Columbia Heights school districts reopened today, this after canceling classes last week because of safety concerns. The districts are offering extra security measures this week. NPR also reports that Latino-owned businesses statewide are reporting less foot traffic in their stores because many of their customers are afraid to leave their homes amid ICE enforcement operations in the state. NPR writes, quote, while those operations are focused largely in the Twin Cities, the effects are being felt across the state. They quote Wilbur De La Rosa, who owns a restaurant and market in Rochester, Minnesota, saying, quote, almost 8 weeks in a row, we've seen decreased selling because of this fear. People don't want to go outside and buy stuff. NPR adds that Wilbur De La Rosa is a U.S. citizen, but he still carries documentation with him in case he is stopped by ICE. Now, back here in Washington, House Democratic leader Hakeem Jeffries was also asked about the situation and if he thinks Homeland Security Secretary Kristi Noem should appear before Congress to talk about how she's doing her job.
Kristi Noem should stop hiding behind her MAGA wardrobe and actually come before the Congress and face the American people through their elected representatives. If she thinks her position is defensible, then show up, as opposed to stopping by for a drive-by and then scurrying out of the hearing with some fake excuse because you can't stand the heat. And that was before the killing of Renee Nicole Good. So it is clear that Kristi Noem should show up and be held accountable before the elected representatives in the House of Representatives, whether that's the Homeland Security Committee, first and foremost, Judiciary, or Oversight. But House Democrats are going to have a family conversation throughout the week in the caucus meeting and in the whip meeting about the path forward related to these most recent developments. We are unified behind the fact that under the leadership of Pramila Jayapal, there's going to be a hearing that House Democrats will hold this Friday in Minneapolis as part of the effort to hold the Department of Homeland Security accountable for its out-of-control behavior.
House Democratic Leader Hakeem Jeffrey speaking at the Capitol. You can see all of his statement at cspan.org and the free C-SPAN Now mobile app. Also today here in D.C., in an event we carried live on the C-SPAN networks, Senate Banking Ranking Member Senator Elizabeth Warren shared her thoughts on the future of the Democratic Party. This event was hosted by the National Press Club.
Here at home, President Trump's tariffs are driving up costs for families. Millions of Americans have lost their health insurance so that Republicans could fund tax breaks for rich people. ICE is sowing chaos and terror in our communities, resulting in the tragic killing of Renee Good in Minnesota. And Donald Trump's view of the First Amendment is that he gets to say whatever he wants, and he gets to use the power of government to silence, extort, bankrupt, or even prosecute anyone who criticizes him. Acting like a wannabe dictator that he is, Trump is trying to push out the chairman of the Federal Reserve Board and complete his corrupt takeover of America's central bank so that it serves his interests along with his billionaire friends. And he has invaded Venezuela to boost the profits of oil companies and has announced that he will run the country. Now, none of this would be happening if Democrats hadn't been wiped out in 2024. And according to some self-described experts, Democrats lost power because we were too progressive. For a lot of powerful people, wealthy people from Wall Street, Silicon Valley, and Washington, too progressive is code used to undermine any economic agenda that favors working people. Look, they put it more politely, but these movers and shakers want the Democratic Party to respond to the 2024 losses by watering down our economic agenda and sucking up to the rich and powerful, claiming that a less progressive Democratic Party will win more elections. They are wrong. Americans are stretched to the breaking point financially, and they will vote for candidates who name what is wrong and who credibly demonstrate that they will take on a rigged system in order to fix it. Revising our economic agenda to tiptoe around that conclusion might appeal to the wealthy, but it will not help Democrats build a bigger tent. And it definitely will not help Democrats win elections. A Democratic Party that worries more about offending big donors than delivering for working people is a party doomed to fail in 2026, 2028, and beyond.
Senator Warren also offered her view of President Trump's actions with the Federal Reserve and its chair, Jerome Powell.
Donald Trump has made clear since right at the beginning of his presidency that he wants to be the decision maker on where interest rates should be set. And he's made that clear repeatedly. He's made it clear by threatening to fire Jerome Powell. He's made it clear by threatening to fire Lisa Cook, another Federal Reserve governor. He's made it clear by picking a fight over the renovation of the historic Fed building. He's made it clear by issuing a statement that says he's not going to nominate anybody to the Fed as chair who doesn't agree with him all of the time. That's what Donald Trump wants. He's saying, I want to put my hand on the dials on monetary policy. And Jerome Powell and some of the Fed have resisted him and said very calmly that they are going to continue to look at the economic data and that they are going to make decisions based on what the economic data say. And that's just not only not good enough for Donald Trump, it's a challenge to who Donald Trump is. It's a challenge to somebody who thinks he's supposed to run everything. And so Donald Trump just stays after it. And now this is a question about weaponizing the Department of Justice right out in plain view in order for Donald Trump to try to have a chance to take over the Fed as quickly as possible so that he can make political decisions that he thinks will help him rolling into the 2026 election, even if it has disastrous long-term consequences for our economy and also for our economic structure. And you know, I just want to add one more point to this. What Trump is trying to do is terrible for our economy, but it undermines America all around the world. People rely on the American economic system, and I'm saying this at a writ large, that it's a Fed that's independent, it's making decisions based on data. You may like them, you may not like them. I've often not liked them and disagreed on the data, but that it's making its decisions based on its best understanding of the data. The Fed has been the gold standard for that kind of monetary policy decision making, and Donald Trump is just burning that to the ground. And that's going to be costly for the United States. In all of our global markets, it's going to be costly for the United States over a very long arc if Trump gets away with this.
Now, after today's event, Senator Warren released a statement that reads in part, "This morning I gave a speech noting how Donald Trump is driving up costs for families, sowing terror and chaos in our communities, and abusing his power to prosecute anyone who criticizes him. I said that if he really wants to get something done, including capping credit card interest rates or lowering housing costs, he would use his leverage and pick up the phone." The statement goes on to read, "After my speech, the president called me, and I delivered this same message on affordability to him directly. I told him that Congress can pass legislation to cap credit card rates if he will actually fight for it. I also urged him to get House Republicans to pass the bipartisan Road to Housing Act, which passed the Senate with unanimous support and would build more housing and lower costs." That part of a statement from Senator Elizabeth Warren following her event at the National Press Club today. You can see the entire event at cspan.org and C-SPAN Now. Also today, a group of Republican attorneys general spoke to reporters about upcoming Supreme Court oral arguments on two cases challenging state bans on transgender athletes. Those cases are West Virginia v. BPJ and Little v. Hickox. Speaking at today's event was former University of Kentucky swimmer and current podcast host Riley Gaines.
While, of course, I'm excited for the opportunity for the case that will be heard tomorrow, truthfully, I'm pissed off. I'm pissed off that we've reached a point where we seemingly have an entire political party who has diminished and erased our rights as women. That's exactly what this is. Don't let them frame it any other way. They love to hide behind words like compassion and empathy and inclusion. Let me be very, very clear. What me and what my teammates faced, it was not inclusive. It was exclusive, because we as women were excluded from participating, from competing, from calling ourselves champions, because we were sent the message, and there's lots of fingers to point. I mentioned the Democratic Party. You could point a finger at many different institutions, the NCAA being one of them. We were told loud and clear that our rights to safety, our rights to privacy in areas of undressing, our rights to equal opportunity, they didn't matter. They certainly didn't matter as much as the boy's feelings, the man's feelings, his happiness. We were told that mattered more than our rights. I'm not going to spend any time explaining my story. I think by now it's well documented. When I first used my voice, though, back in 2022, I felt alone. I really did. There were very few, at least my understanding at the time, who were willing to put their name and their face to such a controversial issue, to say the controversial thing that there are two sexes. and that you can't change your sex, and that each sex is deserving of equal opportunity, of privacy, and of safety. Now I understand, though, that I really wasn't alone. There were people, women, fighting far longer than I had been, even now at this time.
Former University of Kentucky swimmer, current podcast host Riley Gaines. Now, the court is scheduled to hear that West Virginia case tomorrow. Here's West Virginia Attorney General J.B. McCuskey.
So we all fully expect that this is going to be a 9-0 decision. We are right on the facts. We're right on the Constitution. We are right in public opinion, but importantly, we're right on common sense. And these are the kind of issues that even conservatives and liberals can agree on. And so, I don't go into any argument assuming that I'm going to lose anybody. And so it is our mission and our goal to make sure that this case is decided in our favor. And we believe very, very strongly in our arguments. So we're looking for a 9-0 decision, and we feel really good about it. No, my solicitor, Michael Williams, and his team of Caleb David and Holly Wilson will be doing the argument.
Supreme Court rules?
It's sort of unknown, but we would estimate sometime at the end of June or in the middle of July. You're welcome.
West Virginia Attorney General J.B. McCuskey. The oral argument scheduled to start at 11 a.m. Eastern Time tomorrow. We'll have it live here on C-SPAN Radio. Finally, 90 years ago today, this from United Press International in the Dateline Oakland Airport, Oakland, California. Amelia Earhart brought her trim red monoplane to Earth at 4:30 p.m. New York time today, completing the first solo flight ever made between the Hawaiian Islands and the American mainland. She had left Wheeler Field near Honolulu at 10:13 p.m. New York time on January 11th. And from the C-SPAN Video Library, here's newsreel coverage from the 20th anniversary of that event.
It's 1935, Weaver Field, Honolulu, Hawaii, and the first outstanding woman flyer, Amelia Earhart Putnam, prepares to fly the Pacific, carrying 500 gallons of gasoline and heading toward California at 155 miles per hour. The plane and its pilot successfully navigate 2,400 miles of ocean to land safely at Oakland, California. A later trip is to bring tragedy to Lady Lindy, but this time Amelia Earhart Putnam, who in 1928 flew the Atlantic, conquers another ocean. Little does she dream that the continent is later to be spanned by passenger planes in 10 hours and less, as she predicts cross-country flights of 48 hours.
The fastest form of transportation the world has ever known. Women are quick to realize that it offers luxury and comfort and beauty equal to that of the more accustomed travel mode. In the United States, there are as fine airlines as in any part of the world. So when you plan to come to California or go east, be sure to fly with us on our 48-hour coast-to-coast service.
The voice of Amelia Earhart on January 12th, 1935. You hear her promoting her airline. She was a partner in a company called Transcontinental Air Transport, which would later go on to become a part of TWA Airlines. UPI reports on that day, her flight time on January 12th, 1935, 18 hours, 17 minutes. They write, quote, a crowd of 5,000 gathered at the field gave the smiling blonde aviatrix a rousing ovation. Miss Earhart wore a brown one-piece fur-lined chamois coverall. Before she climbed from the plane's cabin, she stopped to powder her nose after running a comb through her tousled hair. Then she leaped nimbly to the ground, smiling and seemingly little fatigued. Her first sentence, I'm sure glad to be on land again. You can learn more about that day and Amelia Earhart's accomplishments on C-SPAN's American History TV. You can find all of that at cspan.org. That's also where you can find this program as a podcast. It's also on the C-SPAN Now mobile app, and it's on YouTube. Just search Washington Today. And a reminder, the C-SPAN networks are now available on YouTube TV. You can go to tv.youtube.com to learn more. And if you want more on the stories that are shaping Washington every day, get our daily email word for word. Just go to cspan.org/connect to subscribe. I'm Gary Sterkoff. Thanks a lot for listening today to Washington Today.